sunshine. I realize I am in sunshine. The skies are turning blue. Would you like to go to the top of sunshine?
Hello again, welcome to another episode of Accept Truth with Joy. In this episode, I'm going to look at the question of, was there no death before the fall? This question is kind of interesting, and I'm not going to spend too much time today on this, but some people try to look at this question of, well, let's see what are the authoritative statements or the talks or the manuals or whatever, and they try to like stack these up. So I've put this as kind of like a scale here. And some people work at this to try to say, all right, how many things say no death and how many things say death? And I guess that's an okay approach. And so I've spent some time doing this, and you could do this too, just doing a simple Google search of, no death before the fall LDS, something like that, or even just going to the church website and looking this up. What you'll start to see very quickly, people have analyzed this before, so this is nothing new, but you'll start to see that very quickly most of the stuff that you're going to find is going to be supporting the hypothesis that there was no death before the fall. Some of the most clear examples are things like the Bible Dictionary. There's an entry on the fall of Adam and Eve. There's an entry on death. And there's statements in there that are very clear. It says there was no death before the fall. You'll even see references to this in some of the church manuals. You'll see this in some of the talks, of course, of church leaders, not necessarily when they were the prophet, but when they were, apostles. Particularly, you'll find a lot within Joseph Fielding Smith and Bruce McConkie that tend to lean upon some of the young earth creationist ideas. And so if you do this, you're going to see this start to pile up. Well, what about on the other side? Well, you will get a few things. You'll get things from Talmage and Widsoe. I mean, they were both scientists, and so they knew about what science was saying, and so they were unwilling to go down the path of no death before the fall because they knew about fossils and paleontology and archaeology. Also, recently, Jeffrey Holland also gave a talk where he relaxed the assumption of all death and just moved that towards just human death. I'll link to his talk as well in the notes here. But again, is this how we should decide things in the church? Is just start to count up the number of references that went one way or another? Especially if this is an issue where science can come to bear. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether this is the right way to do this, but clearly some people like to do this, where what are the number of statements on one side versus another side. What is clear is if on this question of was there death before, again, we don't even know when the fall was, but let's assume the fall happened anywhere between 200,000 years ago when, the earliest Homo sapiens were on the planet, and, 6,000 years ago, which is more like the biblical reckoning of when the fall occurred. Even if it was in anywhere within that time frame, the question really is then, was there death happening on planet Earth before 200,000 years ago or before 6,000 years ago? And the answer is clearly yes. There was clearly death in all kinds of organisms. Obviously the clearest example are things like dinosaurs, right? But I've mentioned this before, most of everything that has ever lived on planet Earth has already gone extinct. So yes, of course there was death. And so this clearly, I don't think that you can interpret any of this to mean, was there no death at all whatsoever in any organisms, bacteria to protists, to animals, to plants, before the fall of Adam and Eve. Okay, so then what do you do? What do we do with this? Well, again, I don't have all the answers, but I think that it is clear to just fall back on our position that I'm using on this channel, which is that which has been demonstrated, we should accept with joy. And I think that it's clearly been demonstrated in science that there was death before the fall. So what do? Well, we can try to reinterpret some of this a little bit, or at least just ask questions. So let me just pose some questions here. So maybe death just meant for Adam and Eve. Maybe. Maybe death just meant for human death. Maybe death just meant for the Garden of Eden. Although even that one's kind of problematic because if Adam and Eve were eating things, then they were eating other things that were alive and processing, metabolizing those cellular components, and those cells were dying. Plus, I mean, our skin cells, I mean, does this mean skin cells weren't dying? Does this mean bacteria weren't dying? I really don't know. I don't know how to deal with all of that. Maybe death just meant for the spiritual death. You know, maybe once again, it's like the scriptures are not really trying to explain biology and chemistry and physics. Maybe what the scriptures are saying is they're trying to teach us about spiritual principles and about our spiritual relationship to God, whether we're separated from Him or not, and what we can do to overcome that separation. I tend to fall in that category of that might be the best answer, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And maybe it's something else, right? But at least it's something you have to think about. But I think this is a really good example of where the preponderance of statements in the church clearly support the no death before the fall position, yet the evidence in nature, in the book of nature, God's book of nature, clearly shows that there was death before the fall. So you've got to try to reconcile those things. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I hope I've provided some options for you to think about.
Sunshine with me. The doors are open, the skies are too. Sunshine is coming in for me and you. Sunshine.